You're easily replaceable, Phil. Any intern could do your job. My boss Robert Martinez's words echoed through the meeting room like a shot in the silence. He didn't even look up from his papers as he shattered 8 years of my career with a single sentence. I sat at that oval glass table, surrounded by the other project managers, all avoiding my gaze. The meeting was about human resource optimization, fancy corporate language for laying people off. But it wasn't about me. Or at least, it wasn't supposed to be. My name is Phil Anderson. I'm 42 years old, and until 5 minutes ago, I thought I was indispensable at TechFlow Solutions. For almost a decade, I was the guy who saved every project that went wrong. The systems expert that no one else understood. The problem solver who worked late when deadlines loomed. But there, on that gray Tuesday in November, Robert looked at me as if I were just another number on a spreadsheet. Actually, he continued, leafing through his reports with disinterest, we're promoting Danny Walsh to head up the critical systems division. He has fresh ideas and youthful energy. Danny Walsh. 26 years old, graduated 2 years ago, and son of the company's biggest client. The kid who arrived at 10 in the morning, left at 5 sharp, and whose greatest technical contribution so far had been to suggest that we migrate everything to the cloud, without understanding what that meant. I kept my expression neutral, a skill I had developed after years of dealing with frustrated clients and impossible deadlines. I see. And what will my new role be? You will continue as a senior analyst, obviously. Danny will need someone experienced to guide him through the first few months. Guide him. Translation: do all the work while he takes the credit. What Robert didn't know was that I had arrived at that meeting, already suspecting what was coming. The week before, I had noticed some private meetings taking place without me. Emails about projects that I always coordinated, but which were now directed to Danny. Small signs that, alone, meant nothing. Together, they painted a very clear picture. I had built that division from scratch when I joined the company. At the time, the systems were chaotic, old servers, disorganized code, manual processes that took days to complete. I worked 60 hours a week during the first year, documenting everything, creating automations, establishing protocols. I transformed a dysfunctional department into an efficient machine that processed millions of data daily without fail. Every critical system in the company passed through my hands. Every automated process had my fingerprint on it. Every emergency protocol, I had written personally. I'm sure Danny will do very well, I said, with a smile that didn't reach my eyes. After all, the systems are working perfectly now. Robert nodded absently. Exactly. That's why it's a good time for this transition. You did a great job organizing everything, Phil. Now we need strategic vision for the next level. Strategic vision. As if managing critical systems were just a matter of having fresh ideas, rather than years of technical experience and in-depth knowledge of each component. I left that meeting room with a familiar feeling of having been perfectly polite and completely disrespected. I walked to my car in the parking lot, sat in the driver's seat, and picked up my phone. 23 missed calls. 15 text messages. 12 emails marked as urgent. All related to the same problem. The main data server had crashed during the meeting, and no one knew how to restart it without losing critical information. I looked at the messages with a strange calm. Danny was panicking, Robert was furious, and the IT department was admitting it didn't even know where to start. It was at that moment, sitting in my car while my phone kept ringing, that I made a decision that would change everything. I wasn't going to quit in a fit of rage. I wasn't going to make a scene or complain about injustice. I was going to do something much more effective. I was going to follow my new job description exactly as it was written. If you're enjoying this story of how a dedicated employee discovered the true value of his work, don't forget to subscribe to the channel to see how this situation unfolds. Because what Robert and Danny didn't know was that there's a huge difference between keeping systems running and understanding why they work. And they were about to learn that lesson the hard way. For 8 years, Robert Martinez built his reputation as the guy who made things happen at TechFlow Solutions. At 45, he had the arrogant confidence of someone who never really needed to understand how the work was done. He just needed to know who to blame when it went wrong. Robert hired me shortly after he took over as general manager. At the time, he had inherited a systems department that was literally collapsing. 3 analysts had quit in the same month, the servers crashed weekly, and our biggest client was threatening to terminate the contract because of the constant failures. I came from a smaller company where I had learned systems from scratch, working directly with code and hardware. While my colleagues focused on certifications and networking, I spent entire nights understanding every component, every process, every possible point of failure. Robert offered me the job with a simple promise: fix this, and you'll be rewarded. During the first few months, I slept at the office more often than at home. I rebuilt every system, documented every process, and created redundancies to prevent critical failures. In 6 months, I turned chaos into an operation that ran like a Swiss watch. Robert's reward? Never again questioning how or why things worked. He simply assumed they always would. Danny Walsh was everything Robert admired: young, ambitious, and most importantly, the son of Gerald Walsh, owner of Walsh Industries, our $8 million a year client. At 26, Danny had that natural arrogance of someone who never had to prove his worth. He had graduated with a business degree with average grades, spent 2 years finding himself in Europe, and now needed a job that would justify his father's investment in his education. During the 3 months Danny interned with us before his promotion, I observed his approach to work. He arrived at 10, left at 5, and spent most of his time in meetings talking about innovation and disruption, without understanding the basic systems that kept everything running. When asked about technical details, Danny would respond with jargon that sounded impressive but meant nothing. "We need to migrate to a more agile architecture in the cloud," he would say, unaware that our critical systems required physical servers for security and compliance reasons. But Robert was dazzled. Danny represented everything he thought the company needed: youthful energy, family connections, and above all, validation that his management decisions were visionary. What neither of them understood was that my actual role in the company went far beyond the official description on paper. Officially, I was a senior systems analyst, a title that suggested limited and well-defined responsibilities. In reality, I was the institutional guardian of every critical process in the company. I knew every server by name, every code by its history, every emergency protocol because I had created them myself. When the backup system failed at 3 in the morning, it was my phone that rang. When an important client had an urgent demand that required changes to protocols, I was available to implement them. When our competitors attempted denial of service attacks, I coordinated the response. But none of that existed in my official job description. According to the paper, I was supposed to monitor systems during business hours and report problems to the direct supervisor, who would now be Danny. As I drove back to the office, my phone kept ringing incessantly. The messages became increasingly desperate. "Phil, where are you? The whole system is down." Danny, first message. "Emergency. Customers can't access their data. I need you now." Robert, caps lock and all. "Man, Danny is in a total panic. He doesn't even know how to turn on the backup servers. Get back here." Marcus, from IT. I arrived at the office at 2:15 p.m., right on time for my official work hours. The scene was one of controlled chaos: Danny running between desks with a look of barely concealed panic, Robert yelling on the phone with customers, and the IT team looking at me like I was a hero returning from war. Thank God. Danny practically yelled when he saw me. "Where were you? We tried calling you 1,000 times." "I was having lunch," I replied calmly, hanging my coat on my chair. "I'm back at my regular working hours. What seems to be the problem?" The problem, as I already knew, was that the main server had crashed during an automatic backup routine I had programmed years ago. It was a known glitch that happened about every 6 months, always solvable in 15 minutes if you knew which protocol to follow. The protocol was documented on page 142 of the manual I had created. The same manual that no one had ever read completely. "The whole system crashed during your meeting," Marcus explained, sweating despite the air conditioning. "We can't access anything. Customers are calling in angry because they've lost access to their data." I walked over to my computer and opened the diagnostic panel. Everything confirmed what I already knew: standard failure, easy solution, but one that required specific knowledge of emergency protocols. "I see," I muttered, studying the data with theatrical care. "It appears to be an overload on the main system during automatic backup. Can you fix it?" Robert appeared at my side, his voice carrying an urgency that contrasted sharply with the calm with which he had dismissed me 2 hours earlier. I looked at him thoughtfully. "Well, technically, critical fault resolution isn't specified in my official job description. That would be the responsibility of the critical systems manager. I discreetly pointed to Danny, who visibly paled. But you always fix these problems. Danny protested. In the past, I took initiatives beyond my official responsibilities, I explained patiently. But with the restructuring and new leadership, I thought it would be best to follow more formal protocols. Robert chewed his words as if they were glass. Phil, we need to fix this now. Customers are threatening to cancel contracts. I fully understand the urgency, I replied. I suggest Danny implement the recovery protocols documented in the operations manual. It's in Section 4, subsection 12.3. The entire procedure is detailed there. Danny frantically leafed through his copy of the manual, a 300-page tome he was clearly seeing for the first time. It'll take me hours to understand this, he admitted, his confidence completely evaporating. That was exactly what I hoped to hear. Alternatively, I continued, I can implement a temporary fix while Danny studies the permanent procedures. It would be a good opportunity for hands-on training. If you're wondering how this seemingly simple situation will turn into something much more complex, keep following our story. Because what happened that afternoon was just the first domino falling. And no one, not Robert, not Danny, not even me, could have imagined the size of the chain reaction that was about to begin. I solved the server problem in exactly 12 minutes. One click on the emergency protocol, 3 commands on the terminal, and the system was back to normal. Danny stood by my side the whole time, trying to understand what I was doing, asking questions that demonstrated an almost impressive technical ignorance. How did you know that was the problem? He asked, staring at the lines of code on the screen as if they were ancient hieroglyphics. Experience, I replied simply. This type of failure happens about every 6 months. The pattern is documented in the manual, Section 4. Robert appeared behind me just as the last system came back online. Perfect. I knew you'd fix it quickly. Interesting how my competence was obvious when he needed it, but easily replaceable when he didn't. Actually, I corrected politely, it took longer than usual because I had to explain each step to Danny. Normally, it would be a 5-minute fix. Danny blushed visibly. Over the next few days, I watched with clinical fascination as my new approach revealed the true dependency structure of the company. On Wednesday, I arrived at exactly 9 o'clock, not a minute before. I found 7 urgent emails from Danny, all sent at 7 in the morning, asking for clarification on basic processes that any systems manager should know. Phil. Danny practically ran to my desk. I urgently need to know how to access last month's backup logs. The Morrison client is questioning inconsistencies in the data. I opened my procedures manual to page 105. The process is detailed here. Access to historical logs requires authorization from 2 supervisors and adherence to the audit protocol. But you always gave me direct access when I asked, he protested. In the past, I took certain procedural liberties to speed up operations, I explained. But with the new hierarchical structure, I thought it prudent to follow official protocols. After all, you're the senior manager now. Danny leafed through the manual with an increasingly desperate expression. This will take hours. The protocols exist for important security reasons, I replied. Surely you understand the need to follow proper procedures. Thursday brought the first real crisis. Marcus from IT appeared at my desk at 10:30 a.m. with an expression of barely concealed panic. Phil, we have a serious problem. The automatic backup system failed overnight and corrupted some files. Danny tried to do a manual restore, but, well, let's just say it made the situation worse. I walked to the server room, where I found Danny sweating in front of a monitor displaying error messages in red. 3 technicians surrounded him, all with expressions ranging from confusion to terror. What exactly happened? I asked, examining the error logs. I tried to implement the recovery protocol you used on Monday, Danny explained, his voice trembling slightly. But something went wrong, and now we're experiencing data loss across multiple clients. I studied the screen carefully. Danny had, in fact, attempted to follow the correct protocol. The problem was that he had skipped critical steps and implemented commands out of sequence. It was like trying to play a symphony but jumping to the 3rd movement in the middle of the 1st. I see the problem, I murmured. You implemented the recovery sequence without first running the integrity check protocols. Can you fix it? Marcus asked, his voice carrying desperate hope. It was an interesting question. Technically, I could solve the problem in about 45 minutes. But according to my official job description, corrupted data recovery was classified as a critical systems operation, the sole responsibility of the senior manager. Well, I said slowly, corrupted data recovery isn't listed in my official responsibilities. That would be a management-level decision. Danny paled even further. But you have more experience. Certainly, I agreed. But experience is no substitute for proper hierarchical authority. You were promoted specifically to make these kinds of critical decisions. Robert stormed into the server room. What's going on? I've had 5 calls from angry customers in the last 10 minutes. We had a situation with a nightly backup, Danny explained, his confidence completely evaporated. I'm trying to resolve it. Robert looked at me with obvious expectation. Phil, can you? With all due respect, I interrupted politely, I think it would be inappropriate for me to make decisions that exceed my authority. Danny is the senior manager responsible for critical operations. An awkward silence followed. I could see Robert doing mental calculations. How many customers were affected, how much money was at risk, how long it would take Danny to learn what to do. How long would it take you to resolve this? Robert finally asked. Approximately 45 minutes for full recovery, I replied. Plus 2 hours to implement safeguards to prevent recurrence. And how long would it take Danny to learn the process? I glanced at Danny, who was frantically flipping through his manual, sweating despite the air conditioning in the server room. Considering the technical complexity and the learning curve required, maybe 6 to 8 hours. Assuming no additional complications arise. 6 to 8 hours? Robert nearly shouted. We can't be without systems that long. I fully understand the urgency, I replied calmly. It's a difficult situation. Perhaps we should consider hiring outside expertise. That's when something changed in Robert's expression. For the first time since we met, I saw genuine concern in his eyes. Not concern for me or Danny, but for his own position. Phil, he said, his voice taking on a different tone, as a senior employee of the company, you have a responsibility to act in the best interests of our customers. Absolutely, I agreed. And that's exactly why I suggest following proper protocols. We don't want to set precedents of unclear authority or undefined responsibility. Marcus was watching us as if he were watching a very slow and very important tennis match. Danny had stopped flipping through the manual and was just standing there, apparently realizing that this was way beyond his capabilities. Okay, Robert finally said. Solve the problem. We can discuss protocols later. I'll be happy to help, I replied, but I'd like to clarify a few things first. Would this be an official request from Danny, as my direct supervisor? Robert looked at Danny, who nodded desperately. Perfect, I said, sitting down at the main workstation. Danny, I suggest you watch closely. This will be an important part of your development as a manager. As I worked on recovering the data, I provided a running commentary on every process, every decision, every command. Not out of generosity, but because I wanted everyone in the room to understand exactly how complex my actual job was. Now I implement a 3-layer integrity check, I explained, my fingers flying over the keyboard. First we check some consistency, then data structure validation, and finally timestamp synchronization. Danny tried to take notes, but it was obvious he was lost. Marcus nodded in recognition. He understood enough to realize he was witnessing something far beyond basic knowledge. That's incredibly complex, Danny muttered. Actually, I replied, it's relatively basic. The really complex situations involve data corruption across multiple simultaneous systems. I've dealt with scenarios that took 16 hours to resolve. Robert was silent, watching everything with an expression I couldn't quite read. In 42 minutes, all systems were functioning normally. The corrupted data was completely recovered, and I implemented 3 additional safeguards that would prevent the problem from recurring. All done, I announced, rising from my chair. All operating systems, data recovered, prevention protocols implemented. Fantastic. Robert said, relief obvious in his voice. I knew you'd figure it out. Actually, I corrected, this demonstrates precisely why we have hierarchical protocols. Danny now has hands-on experience with data recovery, which will be valuable for his professional development. Danny didn't seem particularly grateful for the learning opportunity. Friday arrived with an emergency meeting. At 8:30 a.m., I received an email from Robert, mandatory meeting at 9 a.m. main conference room. Subject: departmental restructuring. I arrived at 9 o'clock sharp to find Robert, Danny, and 3 people I didn't recognize, probably from corporate headquarters. Everyone looked tense. "Phil," Robert began without preamble, "we've had a challenging week. Some operational issues have caused us to rethink our departmental approach." One of the executives from headquarters, a woman in her 50s with a stern expression, was leafing through a thick folder. "Mr. Anderson, your colleagues have described you as indispensable to the operations of this division." "I would say I am experienced," I replied carefully. "In your opinion," she continued, "what would be the best structure to ensure efficient operational continuity?" It was a loaded question. I could feel Danny shifting uncomfortably in the chair next to me. "Well," I said slowly, "I believe that any effective structure must align responsibility with authority. If someone is responsible for results, they must have the authority to make operational decisions." The executive made some notes. "And in terms of personnel development?" "Real development requires time, structured mentoring, and gradual exposure to increasing responsibilities. You can't just put someone in an advanced position and expect instant competence." Robert was visibly uncomfortable. "Mr. Anderson," the executive finally said, "we would like to offer you the position of Director of Technical Operations, reporting directly to headquarters. That would include complete authority over all critical systems and responsibility for personnel development." That whole optimization meeting on Tuesday seemed like it had happened months ago, not days. "It's an interesting offer," I replied. "Can I have some time to consider it?" "Certainly. But we need an answer by Monday." I left that meeting with a strange sense of satisfaction. It wasn't triumph, exactly. It was more like confirmation of something I had always known, but that no one else had noticed until now. In the parking lot, as I walked to my car, my phone rang. It was my brother Tom, who worked for a technical consulting firm. "Phil, how's work?" "Funny you should ask," I replied. "I just got a promotion offer." "Really? About time. Did that idiot boss finally recognize your value?" I laughed, "Despite everything. Something like that. But I'm considering other options as well." "What kind of options?" I sat in the car, but didn't start the engine right away. "Tom, do you still have contacts at that consulting firm in Seattle? The one that pays 60% above the market average?" There was a pause. "Why are you asking?" "Because maybe it's time to find out how much I'm really worth on the open market. If you want to know whether Phil will accept the promotion or make a decision that will completely change the game, keep following our story. Because the real revenge hadn't even begun yet. And when it did, no one, not Robert, not Danny, not even corporate headquarters, would be prepared for the consequences of what they had set in motion." Over the weekend, I did something I hadn't done in years. I completely disconnected from work. No emails checked, no calls answered, no thoughts about systems or protocols. Instead, I sat on the porch with a cup of coffee and started making a list. Not a list of tasks or professional responsibilities. A list of everything I had sacrificed over the past 8 years in the name of corporate loyalty. Holidays lost because some system had failed. Weekends destroyed by emergencies that could have waited until Monday. Dinners cancelled because Robert needed reports for meetings he didn't always attend. The list took up 3 pages. On the second page, I started a new list, all the times my expertise had saved the company from real crises. The ransomware attack of 2020 that locked up our systems for 6 hours until I discovered a vulnerability in the malware itself. The hardware failure that nearly cost us our contract with Morrison Industries. The bug in the legacy code that would have corrupted 3 years of customer data. Also 3 pages. On the third list, I put all the times Robert had taken credit for solutions I had implemented. Presentations to headquarters where he explained his technological innovations using slides I had prepared. Meetings with clients where he talked about his technical team as if they were the brains behind the operations. 4 pages. On Sunday night, I called my brother Tom. "Phil, how was your weekend?" Did you get to relax a little? Actually, I spent my time doing a personal audit, I replied. Tom, do you still have contacts at Pacific Northwest Tech Solutions? There was a pause. Sure. Why do you ask? I need to know my real market value. Not what TechFlow thinks I'm worth, but what other companies would pay for someone with my experience. Phil, what happened on Friday? I told him the whole story, the meeting on Tuesday, my new strategy of following protocols, the chaos of the week, and finally the promotion offer on Friday. Wait, Tom said when I finished. They offered you exactly what you wanted after a week of you following your job description to the letter? Basically. And you didn't accept right away? Tom, that's the point. For years, I accepted crumbs while building empires for other people. Now that they finally recognize my value, I have to decide if I want to continue building Robert's empire or if it's time to build my own. On Monday morning, I arrived at the office with a mental clarity I hadn't had in years. Before responding to the offer from headquarters, I needed to understand exactly what was at stake. My first stop was Janet's desk in accounting. Janet, do you have access to the billing data by customer for the last 3 years? Sure, Phil. Any specific analysis? I want to understand the correlation between periods of technical instability and revenue loss. Janet looked at me curiously but compiled the data without question. 2 hours later, I had a fascinating picture. In the 8 years since I was hired, TechFlow had grown from a $15 million a year company to $45 million. Most of that growth came from the ability to retain large customers through consistent uptime and rapid problem resolution. During the 3 periods when I was away, twice for surgery and once for forced vacation, the company had lost $200,000, $350,000, and $500,000 in revenue respectively, due to unresolved technical problems. Mathematically, my presence was worth approximately $1,200,000 annually in protected revenue. My current salary? $65,000 per year. The company was paying 5% of the value I generated. Tuesday brought an unexpected meeting. Richard was visibly nervous when he called me into his office. Phil, I need to talk to you about Danny. What kind of problem? He's struggling to adapt to his responsibilities. Since Friday, we've received 4 customer complaints about slow response times to technical issues. It wasn't surprising. Implementing complex technical solutions wasn't something you could learn in a week, especially when your previous experience was limited. And what would my role be in this situation? Well, maybe you could offer more hands-on guidance. Be more available for quick consultations. Robert, with all due respect, quick consultations during crises don't develop real competence. If Danny is going to lead technical operations, he needs structured training, not emergency solutions. How long would that training take? For basic problem-solving skills? 6 months of intensive mentoring. For advanced skills in systems design? 2 years, at least. Robert rubbed his forehead. We don't have 2 years. We need immediate solutions. Then we need to redefine realistic expectations or re-evaluate the departmental structure. On Wednesday, exactly what I expected happened. Danny showed up at my desk at 8:15 a.m. with an expression of barely concealed panic. Phil, we have an emergency. The backup system failed overnight and corrupted data for the Harrison Group client. They're threatening to terminate the contract if we don't resolve it by noon. Harrison Group. $2 million annual contract. Definitely a real emergency. Did you implement the initial diagnostic protocols? I tried, but it's more complex than I expected. I can't pinpoint exactly where the corruption is. I walked over to the diagnostic station and reviewed the system logs. It was, indeed, a complex corruption affecting multiple layers of data. Solvable, but requiring specific knowledge of backup architecture that was documented only in the most technical sections of the manual. Danny, this is going to be an excellent hands-on learning opportunity, I said. I'll walk you through the process step by step. For the next 3 hours, we worked together on recovering the data. I explained every command, every decision, every necessary security check. Danny took detailed notes and asked intelligent questions that showed he was really trying to understand. This is incredibly complex, he admitted as we implemented the final integrity check. How did you learn all this? 8 years of hands-on experience, I replied. Every system has its quirks. Every type of failure teaches you something new. No manual can replace real-world experience. Phil, can I ask you a personal question? Sure. Do you resent me? Because of the promotion. I stopped typing and looked at him. Danny seemed genuinely concerned, not arrogant as I had initially assumed. Danny, my resentment isn't toward you. It's toward a system that confuses personal connections with technical competence. My father didn't give me this position just out of nepotism, he said defensively. I didn't question your father's motivations. I questioned adequate preparation for critical responsibilities. What if I can develop quickly? Prove that I can learn. If you're willing to invest the necessary time and effort, I can teach you everything I know about these systems. But real development takes time. At that moment, my phone rang. It was a number I didn't recognize. Phil Anderson? Yes. This is David Chun from Quantum Systems Seattle. Tom Anderson gave me your contact information. We have a technical operations director position that might interest you. I looked at Danny, who was clearly listening in on half the conversation. Can I return this call in an hour? I asked. Certainly. But Phil, our offer is competitive. 120,000 base, plus performance bonuses, full benefits package, and equity options. Almost double my current salary. I hung up and went back to the data recovery work. Danny was silent, processing what he had heard. Are you considering other offers? He finally asked. I'm evaluating all my options. What if I can convince my father and Robert to give you more authority, more salary? Would you stay and train me properly? It was an interesting question. Danny wasn't trying to manipulate me or use political connections. He was acknowledging his current limitation and proposing a genuine solution. Danny, I appreciate your honesty. But that's not a decision you can make on your own. But would you consider it? If the conditions were right. We finished recovering the Harrison Group's data at 11:45 a.m., 15 minutes before the deadline. Danny had actively participated in every step and demonstrated a real capacity for learning. As he called the Harrison Group to confirm that the system was operational, I reflected on our conversation. Perhaps there was a third option I hadn't initially considered. Not just accepting the promotion at TechFlow or leaving for Quantum Systems, but using my current position as a platform for something bigger. If you're eager to find out how Phil will use his newfound leverage to turn a simple career decision into something much bigger, stay tuned for the rest of our story. Thursday brought a meeting that would change everything. At 2 in the afternoon, I received an email from Byron at headquarters. Urgent meeting at 3:30. Main conference room. Subject: Departmental restructuring proposal. It was time to find out if my week of following protocols had taught the right people the right lessons. Because what would happen at that meeting would not just be about my promotion or salary. It would be about completely redefining how a $45 million company operated its most critical functions. And this time, I would not just be the invisible technical expert. I would be the architect of a transformation that no one, not Robert, not Danny, not even corporate headquarters, was prepared to face. The 3:30 meeting had been scheduled 2 hours ago, but I arrived 15 minutes early. Not out of anxiety, but because I wanted to observe how each person would enter the room, how they would position themselves, what expressions they would wear. Byron from headquarters was there, along with a stern 50-year-old executive who had offered me the promotion the previous Friday. Robert looked visibly nervous, adjusting his tie every 2 minutes. Danny was sitting in a chair in the corner, clearly outside the circle of power. Phil, Byron began when I sat down, we hope you've had time to consider our offer. I have. And I've also received other interesting proposals that have made me reflect on my real value in the market. The executive, whose name, I later discovered, was Patricia Hendricks, opened a folder. What kind of offers? Quantum Systems Seattle offered a base salary of $120,000, plus performance bonuses and equity options. That's about a 90% increase over my current compensation. The silence was deafening. Robert swallowed hard. It's a competitive offer, Patricia admitted. But we believe you have a solid future here at TechFlow. I appreciate the confidence, I replied calmly. But before I make any decision, I'd like to clarify a few issues about how this company really operates. I took a folder out of my briefcase. Over the weekend, I had compiled data that painted a fascinating picture of TechFlow solutions. During my personal analysis, I discovered some interesting information about our cost structure and operational efficiency. I opened the first page. Over the past 8 years, the company has grown from 15 to 45 million in annual revenue. During that time, technical problems have cost an average of $250,000 annually in lost customers and rework. Patricia took notes. Reasonable numbers for a growing company. True. But there's an interesting pattern. I turned the page. During the 3 periods when I was absent, surgery in 2020, forced vacation in 2021, and medical leave in 2022, technical costs increased by 300%, 400%, and 500% respectively. The pattern was crystal clear. My absence cost the company approximately $1 million per year in avoidable problems. This suggests, I continued, that my actual contribution to the company is significantly greater than my current compensation reflects. Robert finally found his voice. Phil, those numbers don't tell the whole story. You're valuable, but you're not irreplaceable. That's when I decided to play my strongest card. Robert, you're absolutely right. I'm not irreplaceable. In fact, over the past 2 weeks, I've documented exactly what it would take to adequately replace me. I placed a second document on the table. Based on the technical complexity of the systems I manage, the company would need to hire 2 senior specialists, one in systems architecture and one in critical data recovery. The average market salary for these professionals is $85,000 each. Patricia quickly calculated. $170,000 for 2 employees versus $120,000 for you. Economically, you would still be more efficient. Correct. But there is an additional problem. I turned to the next page. These 2 specialists would need approximately 18 months to become fully familiar with our customized systems. During this period, the company would face training costs, operational inefficiencies, and a high risk of critical problems. I paused to let the numbers sink in. Conservative estimate, $2 million in direct and indirect transition costs. The silence in the room was thick. Robert was clearly doing desperate mental calculations. In addition, I continued, I discovered that my departure would trigger certain clauses in the contracts of our 3 largest clients. Clauses related to the continuity of specialized technical personnel. Patricia raised her head abruptly. What kind of clauses? Harrison Group, Morrison Industries, and Cascade Logistics, collectively responsible for $22 million in annual revenue, have the right to renegotiate contract terms in the event of significant changes to key technical staff. It was a bombshell I had discovered while reviewing old contracts over the weekend. Clauses that Robert had apparently never read thoroughly. Essentially, I explained, my departure could result in the loss of up to 40% of the company's annual revenue. Robert was visibly pale now. Phil, those clauses are theoretically applicable, but I doubt that clients. Actually, I interrupted gently, I spoke informally with representatives of all 3 clients this morning. It was at that moment that Robert fully understood the position he was in. For years, he had assumed that I was just a competent but easily replaceable employee. In reality, I had become structurally indispensable to the company's operation. What are you proposing? Patricia asked, her voice carrying a respect that had not been present at the beginning of the meeting. I am proposing a restructuring that benefits both my career and TechFlow's operational stability. I took my final document out of my briefcase. Position of Chief Technology Officer, reporting directly to headquarters. Complete authority over all critical systems, technical staff hiring, and operational protocols. Base salary of $110,000, plus profit sharing based on operational efficiency. Patricia studied the proposal. What about Danny? I looked at Danny, who had watched the entire presentation in silence. During our collaboration on Wednesday, he had demonstrated a genuine capacity for learning and a willingness to work. Danny would be promoted to Junior Technical Operations Manager, reporting directly to me. 2-year development program with increasing responsibilities based on demonstrated competence. Danny nodded gratefully. It was a real opportunity for growth, not just a position given because of family connections. And Robert? Byron asked. Robert would be transferred to strategic business development, focusing on new customer acquisitions and partnerships. His relationship skills would be better utilized externally. It was an elegant lateral promotion. Robert retained prestige and salary, but without authority over technical operations he didn't understand. Patricia closed the folder. We need to discuss this with the board, but the proposal has merit. One question, why not just accept the offer from Seattle? It was the question I had been expecting. Because I've built something here over 8 years. Systems, processes, customer relationships. Leaving would mean seeing all of that potentially fall apart, hurting people who rely on my work. I paused for a moment. But also because, for the first time, I see a real opportunity to transform how this company operates. Not just keeping systems running, but building a structure that develops talent and rewards competence appropriately. Byron and Patricia exchanged meaningful glances. Phil, Byron finally said, your analysis of the situation is enlightening. We'll evaluate your proposal and give you an answer by tomorrow morning. As everyone got up, Robert approached me. Phil, I didn't realize the extent of your contributions. I apologize for the way I handled this situation. I looked at him without malice. Robert, you're good at what you do. Relationships, strategic vision, presentations. The problem was trying to manage technical areas that you never properly studied. Would you give me a second chance to do things right? If headquarters approves the restructuring, we'll have an opportunity to work together more effectively. Each of us focusing on our real strengths. I left that meeting with a strange feeling of completeness. I hadn't yelled, humiliated anyone, or demanded dramatic revenge. I had simply demonstrated my value so clearly and objectively that it became impossible to ignore. That night, while I was having a quiet dinner at home, my phone rang. It was Danny. Phil, I wanted to thank you for including my development in the proposal. And I apologize for not questioning the initial promotion. I knew I wasn't ready. Danny, you have real potential. You just needed the right opportunity to develop properly. If headquarters approves your proposal, I promise I'll work hard to earn the position. I have no doubt. The next morning, at 8:15, I got a call from Patricia. Phil, the board approved your proposal in its entirety. When can you officially start? I smiled, looking out the window of my apartment. It was a clear November morning, with that golden light that makes everything seem possible. How about we start on Monday? But the real surprise was yet to come. Because what happened during my first week as Chief Technology Officer would reveal something about TechFlow solutions that even I hadn't imagined. Something that would transform a simple departmental restructuring into a complete revolution in the corporate technology industry. And this time, I wouldn't just be the invisible technical expert watching from afar. I would be the architect of changes that would redefine how technology companies treat, develop, and reward true talent. 6 months later, TechFlow Solutions was unrecognizable. Danny had developed real competence, managing technical crises with growing confidence. Robert thrived in sales, closing record deals without technical pressure. More importantly, our division became a model for the entire industry. Companies sent delegations to study our talent development structure based on merit, not connections. Phil, Danny said one Tuesday, I've received an outside offer. Double the salary. And you're going to accept it? No. Here I'm learning from the best. Money comes after competence. Robert had also changed. Thank you for showing me where I really belong, he said sincerely. Sales is my calling. Technology never was. The most profound transformation was mine. I was no longer the invisible expert. I was a mentor, a leader, an architect of futures. Every employee I developed, every system I optimized, every talent that flourished validated years of patience. If this story of belated recognition and organizational transformation has touched you, subscribe to the channel to discover how small decisions can spark complete revolutions. The last time I saw Robert, he was celebrating his 3rd consecutive sales award. You saved me, he admitted. Me? I was building the future I had always envisioned, where competence determines position, not politics.